Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my latest vlog. As promised in my last vlog of just 3 days ago, this one's not about me. This one is about issues, which is hopefully what this vlog is all about. Today, I'd like to speak about something that has been voiced quite vocally over the last couple of days, and it is about the role of activism in the global development and particularly the humanitarian space. And what triggered this discussion was the launch of the Sumut flotilla from Barcelona a couple of days ago that is going to try and break the siege of Gaza. And this is not the first flotilla. We've had a couple of others in the past, the most prominent being the Freedom Flotilla, Madeleine Flotilla, that was helmed by Greta Thunberg and a group of other activists, some of whom, by the way, I think are still detained, but are still under detention or under arrest by Israeli authorities. But this is a much larger flotilla that has now launched a couple of days ago, taking a lot of humanitarian aid, as well as the plea and the cry to end the siege of Gaza. Now, the critiques of these flotillas, quite sadly, have been coming from those people who are supposedly there for the betterment of the marginalized and the underprivileged around the world. And that is the global development and humanitarian spaces themselves. So there is a lot of criticism, mostly, I have to say, by white global development and humanitarian personnel, many of whom belong to large global INGOs, in that all this is being very politicized. And it is undermining the humanitarian aid sector because it's not about providing aid, because the amount of supplies that these flotillas take in is negligible to the amount that's needed. And it is basically creating a very political, activist-oriented streak. And to them I say, are you serious? We are being faced with probably one of the most catastrophic events in human history, modern human history, and that is the complete annihilation of Palestine. Hundreds of thousands of people have been injured, killed, maimed, mutilated, children and babies included. Millions of people are being forced out of their homes, which was a concentration camp to begin with. And the world has been silent. It is allowing this to happen with impunity. And a group of extremely brave individuals, I don't care which race they come from, which part of the world they come from, but a group of extremely upright and brave individuals have gotten onto boats and are sailing towards what is a very threatening situation for them, all because they feel that is something that they have to do. And they are being critiqued as being politicized. So that's wrong on itself, right? And from those organizations and individuals, mind you, in the sector, who have not been able to lift a finger to bring any sort of change to this situation. They have not even been able to fight against the humanitarian blockade themselves, no matter how large these organizations claim themselves to be. And they are critiquing people who are taking measures that talk about freedom, democracy, the idea of collectiveness, collective conscience. And for this to be called political is just beyond me. So that's one side of the issue. The other side of the issue is that the fact that the global development and humanitarian aid industry, and it is an industry, these are industries, these are not actual altruistic community-driven efforts. These are global corporatized efforts controlled by one part of the world. That these industries have never looked at activism as a positive influence on anything. And that has been their biggest failing. Activism is the core of change. Without activism, whether it's physical, even to certain extents, what we call violent activism, or whether it's peaceful demonstrations and protests, without activism, they can never be change. And to call activism to see it as a negativity, instead of a positive element in bringing about positive change, is the reason why these two industries have failed miserably, not just in the face of what is happening in Gaza, but globally, in terms of how they have defined and controlled global development and humanitarian aid and support. Humanitarianism is about human empathy. It's about how humans respond to issues of crisis and pain and suffering. The humanitarian aid industry is the complete opposite of that. And so in that sense, I understand the critique against the flotillas by the humanitarian aid industry, because they are saying, this is not, you are basically making us look bad, which is true. You are looking bad because you're not doing anything. You are making yourselves look bad. But humanitarianism comes from the heart. It doesn't come from a corporate mindset, or it doesn't come from a corporate global conglomerate. It comes from responding instantly. It comes from responding by any which way means you have to pain and suffering. It doesn't come from, oh, we need more funding for this. You cannot projectize activism. And I think that's one of the gripes the industry has against activists and activism, is that they cannot projectize it. Because that's not what activism is all about. I wrote a chapter a couple of years ago where I coined this term, pracademvism. We all talk about pracademics, right? So the bridge between practitioners and academics. But I wanted to add in a third element to that, which is knowledge and experience gained from being an activist. And that has always been disregarded by the industry, always. Activists are seen as somebody out there. They're not seen as part of the evolution of change, positive change, for communities, for countries, for regions, and for organizations as well. They're seen as a completely separate entity. But the reality is, if you're not an activist, then you're really not doing anything of particular value, whether it's in the corporate sector, whether it's in the development sector, whether it's in any other sector, whether it's in politics as well. That's why there are a lot of people within politics who see themselves as activists. There have been arguments in the Western world that academics cannot be activists, and they should not be activists. They should separate activism from academia. I don't see how that's possible, because then academics is basically a dead discipline. You're not talking about change. You're basically just talking about theoretical ideas, and you're talking about textbook cases. You're not talking about reality, on the ground, sheer reality, which is what people need to learn about, and which is what should inform their steps going forward. Activism has to run through everything. I call myself an activist now, and I'm not one of those activists who will go out onto the streets protesting. And that's simply just because it's not part of my personality. It's not that I don't agree with it. I completely agree and support with I wish I had that. I wish I had the guts to do that. But, sadly I don't. My activism comes out in different ways. It comes out through this vlog. It comes out through speaking, through writing. It comes out through actually refusing to do certain things, to work with certain people and certain organizations. That is how I see myself as an activist. Others see themselves in activists as different ways. I followed the work of grassroots activism in Pakistan since I was a young teenager. It had very, very strong roots. Indigenous activism, citizens activism, trade unionism, all of that was basically throttled by controlling entities. like corporations, like the state, like the more powerful and the wealthy, because they didn't want to see themselves being criticized or looking bad. And now the global development industry is doing the same. The humanitarian aid industry is doing the same. When it should be the humanitarian aid, the so-called humanitarian aid providers who should be on those flotillas, taking humanitarian aid any which way as possible instead of criticizing them and saying that this is being political. It is not being political. Activism is the only way forward for us now in this world. To really be vocal and to fight against the injustices that we are seeing. These two industries cannot do anything. I'm sorry, INGOs cannot do anything, and they will not do anything even if they can. Because they don't want to do anything, because that's not how their minds are geared. That's not how the structure is geared. The structure is geared to fight against resistance, not to support it. And so without activism, I don't think we're anywhere. No matter how small that is, or no matter how large that is. All my encouragement, my support, my best wishes for any flotilla that goes out and tries to break the siege and save Gaza. No matter who's on it. Each and every one of us should be on those flotillas right now. Each and every one of us. Even one less is too few. So I'm going to end there, and I'm going to ask us, please, let's give a life to activism. Let's not silo it, let alone push it aside and see it as a threat. For many of us, this is all we have. And you can't pick and choose your activism. And you can't pick and choose your cause either. I hope this gives us some element of pause. And like many, I will also be watching the progress of the flotilla and hope that they remain safe and hope that they actually get the support they need to be able to have the impact that they want to. Thank you very much. Have a great week, everyone.